And next, the legal department.
Good evening.
Page 25.
Yes. Before discussing the figures you see there, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to report an item that I've indicated to the board in a 6-month report recently, which is that over the budget that was budgeted for the entire year, through the first half of the year, the legal department has achieved a savings so far of approximately $52,000. That's made up predominantly of the savings over the use of outside counsel. About $42,000 of that is made up of that figure. What's happening is that much of what was budgeted for in terms of expending on outside counsel is in fact being performed in-house at a substantially lower rate. Instead of incurring the average outside counsel rate of approximately $190 an hour, the in-house personnel at $66 per hour for myself and $44 per hour for the assistant town attorney are performing much of these same hours. For instance, Attorney Robertson, the assistant town attorney, has logged close to 200 hours of time working on personnel matters, primarily in her capacity as human resources coordinator, which has saved over the use of outside counsel time for that same hours approximately $28,000. And as a result, when you are looking at the budget figures that you have in front of you, you see a reduction to reflect the decrease in outside labor counsel time of approximately $19,000. The other, our budget overall, the budget you have in front of you, is down approximately 14%, and that is made up of about $39,000, $19,000 of which reflects a reduction in the outside labor counsel line, and $20,000 of which has been shifted per board instructions over to the assessing department. As Mr. Tinkers, as Selectman Nichols reiterated, we're seeing a number of cases that are going to the Board of Tax and Land Appeals or the Superior Court. These are complex cases involving valuation of utility property and commercial property. Those cases are more complex type. They necessarily require expert input. The expert input is utilized to counter the expert input that is put forward by the entities seeking an abatement. Without expert input, it's very difficult to combat those cases, and certainly it's a necessity more than just a luxury. It's a necessity in fighting those particular cases. I'll give you an example, a case that recently went to trial involving a commercial entity at the BTLA. A decision was recently rendered where there was approximately $230,000 exposure. That is the difference between the town's assessed value and the taxpayer's contention about what the property involved was worth. The end result of that case was that we achieved a result that represents $130,000 savings to the taxpayer off that exposure. That necessarily involved expert input that cost approximately $13,000. That included both an appraisal and a testimony before the Board of Tax and Land Appeals. So that's just one example of the type of exposure you get in these commercial and utility cases. And obviously among the utility cases we have the extra factor to include that abatements are being sought by utilities for right-of-way presence and also the Seabrook Nuclear Power Plant owner. So the figure that you see from Mr. Tinker factoring in his $40,000 savings that is going into the expert potential expenditure and the $20,000 coming from the legal department budget really represents about half what the potential use of experts could be, counting on some of those cases likely to settle after some period of negotiation. It usually precedes the trial of any case. So the budget that you see in front of you is approximately 14% down.
Okay, questions for Mr. Gerald? Mr. Moore?
Go ahead. No, thank you, Mark.
Thank
Good job.
Mr. Pierce?
I only have one, and it's sort of a little off the path a little bit, if you'll excuse me. We're going to have to hire an expert for the water rate increase, correct?
I'm sorry.
That's in this year,
Which increase?
the increase from the quay and water.
Oh, yes. That is under consideration.
Okay.
Actually, to this point in the year, approximately $21,000 has been expended out of the $25,000 budget for expert. There's still some left. I am hoping that whatever we end up needing to expend for expertise in that area may be shared with the town of Northampton, which has just intervened finally.
Finally, yeah.
Finally.
So, you think that'll drag into 2013
Yes,
right now?
I do.
Have you sort of allowed for that in this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there's still a figure in the litigation expense out of the $25,000 of $5,000. And again, it's our hope that the expense will be shared
Hopefully.
among communities, yes.
That'd be great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Bean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Esquire.
Good evening.
Do you enjoy the assistance of a secretary in your office?
At this point, the person who was the longtime assistant, legal assistant with a paralegal degree has become assistant town attorney, so that essentially neither of us has a support person as such. That's correct.
And is any measure addressed in your budget for that going forward?
No, sir.
Okay, and not to push or put forward that point tonight, but I would be interested in some type of measure for that, perhaps even on a part-time basis going forward. And your position has a special consideration in the town. You were at the whim in the decision of the voters last year on the ballot, and your superlative work with tax, with this board, and for the town on behalf of the board, what you've achieved in the courtroom and what you've prevented from going to the courtroom is well deserving of the voters' trust in you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Nichols?
Yeah, kind of echoing a little bit of what Phil said. We went through a two-plus year period of an awful lot of criticism directed to the legal department, primarily related to the amount of money that was spent, as opposed to the quality of work or whatever. Mark, do you recall, I believe it was 2009, where we had some very big numbers in the legal department, much of which were actually settlements, which really don't come out of the budget. They're just posted to that expense level. Net of the settlements, how much did we spend in 2009 in the legal department?
In 2009, the figure was...
I've got a calculator if you like. By the way, this isn't a setup either. He didn't know I was going to ask these questions.
approximately $237,000 was spent net of... I'm sorry.
It's bigger than that.
Yes, I'm sorry, I took the wrong figure.
It was 300 and something thousand.
I believe the figure was approximately 368.
Yep, that sounds about right. So